Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a geographical anomaly that honestly, absolutely defies logic when you first glance at a world map. We are going to unpack the incredible story behind the Northern Crown, and specifically, the Danish acquisition of Greenland. Let's just jump right into this because the history here is packed with surprising twists, ancient migrations, and some incredibly clever, maybe even a bit deceptive, medieval marketing.
Seriously, look at a map sometime. You've probably wondered this yourself. Why on earth does one of the smallest countries in Europe own the largest island on the planet? It honestly feels like a glitch in the geopolitical matrix, doesn't it?
I mean, on one hand, you've got Denmark. It's a gorgeous, compact, relatively small European nation. And on the other hand, there's Greenland, just this sprawling, massive landmass that holds the title of the largest island on Earth. The contrast is absolutely mind-boggling. To figure out how this tiny nation managed to get the keys to this colossal ice kingdom, we have to rewind the clock, way back.
Section 1. The original inhabitants and Viking marketing. Because well before modern European borders were even a thought, the story of this island was already in full swing.
You see, it all actually kicked off long before any Europeans arrived. The original inhabitants migrated over from what we now call Canada. They braved some of the harshest Arctic conditions imaginable, and mostly settled up in the northern parts of the island, carving out a life in a literal frozen wilderness. So eventually the Vikings sail over, right? They land on the southwestern coast, and their very first reaction is basically, wow, this place is freezing. They're staring out at a brutal, icy landscape. But here's the catch. They desperately needed people to join their brand new settlements. A colony needs bodies to survive and thrive. So they pull off what is arguably the very first real estate marketing scam in history. They literally thought, let's just call it Greenland, for marketing. And as ridiculous as that sounds today, this wild branding strategy actually worked.
Which brings us right to the poor folks who actually fell for the pitch. Attracted by the cozy-sounding name, new settlers started arriving, fully expecting lush, rolling green pastures. Instead, they step off their boats straight into a freezing, icy reality. You can almost hear them thinking, wait, did I just get scammed? It's a hilarious historical footnote, sure, but hey, it successfully established a European foothold on the island.
Section 2. The Unified Nordic Crown. Let's look at how those independent Viking outposts got swept up into a massive political machine over time. All right, so moving down the timeline here. By the 13th century, those remote settlements started recognizing Norway's authority, so Greenland officially became part of the Norwegian crown. But the map of Scandinavia was about to get a massive update. Fast forward to the late 14th century and boom, we get a huge geopolitical merger. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden all unite under one single crown. This mega union actually held strong for centuries, right up until the post-Napoleonic era when things finally fell apart.
Now here's the thing. While they were a unified team on paper, the reality on the ground was way more lopsided. Over time, the actual power within this three-country superunion became heavily centralized in Copenhagen. And this centralization basically made Denmark the dominant partner in the whole relationship. Denmark was calling the shots for this enormous unified territory, which naturally included the distant icy expanses of Greenland.
But as you can probably guess, when one partner holds all the cards, the others get a bit resentful. Sweden wasn't exactly thrilled about living in Copenhagen's shadow forever, so eventually Sweden looks at the whole setup and basically says, nah, I'm out, and they decided to split from the Union.
Section 3. The Napoleonic breakup. Because Sweden walking away was really just the opening act for the real drama in the 19th century.
So the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars sweeps through Europe, and the remaining union between Denmark and Norway completely shatters. It is divorce time, which means dividing up the assets. Now remember, historically, Greenland had been a Norwegian possession before the big mega-merger. So you can imagine Norway going into these breakup negotiations thinking, okay, so Greenland is coming with me, right? But Denmark, who had been holding the administrative steering wheel for centuries, simply looks over and says, actually, no.
When the dust finally settled from that messy divorce, the post-war reorganization forced Norway into a brand new union with Sweden. Meanwhile, Denmark walked away with the entire island collection. They kept Greenland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands. Through a complete masterclass in diplomatic maneuvering and centralized power, Denmark managed to retain control of a territory 50 times its size, even as they lost Norway itself.
Section 4. The Path to Autonomy. Let's jump into the modern era to see what actually happened to Denmark's island empire.
Obviously, those 19th century borders weren't going to stay frozen in place forever. Over time, Copenhagen's relationship with its overseas territories evolved a ton. Let's walk through it.
First up, Iceland eventually broke away completely, becoming a fully independent republic. Then the Faroe Islands negotiated a totally new status and gained significant self-government. And following right along that same trajectory, Greenland transitioned from a straight-up colony to gaining widespread autonomy for itself.
So where does that leave us today? Well, right now, Greenland has a massive amount of autonomy. They handle their own domestic affairs, but the truly fascinating part, the real takeaway here, is that they also hold the ultimate right to declare full independence someday if they choose to. Yes, they're currently part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but they hold the absolute power to change that status down the line. It is an incredible shift going from a colonial possession to a totally empowered, self-governing territory.
When you step back and look at the long arc of this whole saga, Sweden leaves, Norway leaves, Iceland leaves, you can almost picture Greenland looking over at Denmark and asking, so basically everyone left and I'm still stuck with you? And history's answer to that is pretty much, yep. It's a wild story, built on ancient marketing, medieval power grabs, and messy post-war treaties. But since Greenland now holds the trump card to declare full independence, the big question is, will they eventually cut the cord completely? Or is this centuries-old icy bond going to hold strong? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.